Hi, welcome to another presentation produced by Grow a Strong Family, developed by me, Mara Briere, Certified Family Life Educator, founder and president of Grow a Strong Family is an organization that supports families uprooted by mental illness. This discussion is about how to manage when loved ones are defensive, not offensive, or is it offensive, not defensive? We will clarify as we go on. We want to acknowledge that the funding for this presentation comes from Shana 15 and your generous. In this webinar, we're going to be discussing offensive and aggressive behavior, defensive behavior. We're going to look at some worksheets and talk about some strategies on how to be safe and how to manage with our loved ones. When our loved ones are stable, that is the ideal time to be developing safety plans and to be discussing it, but we don't always have that luxury. Nonetheless, if you can, when your loved ones are stable, start with each of you agreeing that it is in your mutual best interest to diffuse episodes before they become unmanageable. It benefits everyone to have an attitude of prevention rather than cleaning up after the mess is made. So find out which strategies, if any, that your loved ones are aware of that might be helpful to them. Maybe there's a particular song that they like. Maybe there's a need to be alone for a while. Maybe there's a word that can be used that will enable family members and other loved ones to understand space. That could be a great word. Approach with an attitude of curiosity and respect. Be curious about what your loved ones have identified as of benefit to them. And it's also respectful and mutually respectful to have an understanding that this is in everybody's best interest. So certainly approaching it with an attitude of curiosity and respect just makes good sense. Agree on what symptoms may look like from each of your perspectives, but do this without judgment or criticism. Remember, your loved one has an illness. Would you criticize somebody for how they behaved because of cancer? Makes them more tired, perhaps irritable, they don't want to eat, they feel nauseous, everything makes them feel ill. Would you criticize or judge somebody for that? Then don't do it for somebody who has mental illness and that has symptoms that make them behave or act in ways that are less polite or less than ideal. If your loved one perceives your observations as an attack, don't share them, but do document them in some form so that you remember what you see when you see it. We call those red flags. If you have a clear understanding of what the red flags are for your loved ones, at least you'll be in the position to then take some constructive and positive action. And the other thing that's very helpful to do if we can do it with our loved ones is to have an emergency plan. Some of the leading tools that we want to be thinking about is to think about what you say and how you say it, because that will determine how productive any conversation is. One of my favorite tools to remember this is to think about the word fine. You know how when people ask you, how are you doing? And you say fine. But have you ever heard somebody, typically a teenager, you say, how are they doing? And they'll say, fine. Well, doesn't that give you a hint that they're probably not doing so fine? Or they'll say, fine, which also says, nah, not great. Or fine. All of those different ways of that one word give us a different set of information to understand what it is that they're really saying. So it's not only what is said, but how it is said. So keep that in mind as you enter some of these tricky conversations. The book, I Am Not Sick, I Don't Need Help by Dr. Xander Amador is considered is becoming increasingly and is considered an extremely useful tool, especially for these particular difficult conversations around our loved ones, their illness, what the symptoms look like, how we feel about it. And the tools are from a conglomeration of therapy and good management tools. So we would say, to put it in short terms, LEAP. LEAP means simply to listen, empathize, agree to disagree, and partner in whatever way that you can. Communications that are developed through this are very effective. And some of the tricks that I use after I've read the book and I've looked some up, is I will script what I want to say, and then I will practice it with somebody who I trust to help me plug up the holes. We did this with a parenting program that I'm certified in called Parenting the Love and Logic Way. And this is very similar in that if you want to have a respectful conversation with someone who's already feeling defensive and who's already feeling criticized and judged, then you need an approach that's going to cut through that so that your intent, which is to develop a plan to show someone you love them and you care about them and you want to make things work better, that you have an approach. And that's what this approach does. It enables partners and family members to learn how to listen in such a way that we're respectful. And the result is an immediate decrease of tension, anger, and defensiveness. And the more you convey genuine understanding and respect for someone's point of view, even if you don't agree with it, you find common ground. So even if what you agree on is that whatever it is that's going on, a tone of voice, yelling, screaming, isolating, doors slamming, dishes not being done, clothes not being picked up, someone not bathing, whatever it is, that you can bring it up in such a way that you can both agree that while it is a problem, how can we then solve it? And that's really the tone you want to set, is that even if we don't agree that about what causes a problem, and we don't even have to go there. The only thing that's really important is that we can both come to a place where we can identify that there is an issue and come up with some sort of a solution for it. There is a discussion guide, which is on our website, but I also have a link here, and it's basically really helpful. So we would have our loved ones fill this out, but if they won't, it is a tool that we can use to kind of guide our thinking about how we might want to direct the conversation or what we are observing so that we can come up with some solutions for ourselves. So basically, what are the signs that are telling our loved ones that they're becoming unwell and need to do something about themselves? But if they're not going to participate or they're not well, it could be, what are the signs that tell me that they're becoming unwell and that they need to do something, or that we need to do something? We might need to talk to them about tweaking their meds, seeing their prescribers, um, increasing their therapy, getting back to their routines, whatever they are. If they've written a RAP, which is a Wellness Recovery Action Plan, to review that. If they go to meetings, to go to those meetings. If they're in groups, whatever it is. And then what can I do to prevent myself from becoming unwell? This is something they can look at, but it's also something that you can think about in terms of, what do I need to do to prevent myself from becoming stressed out because they're not well? So you see, we can change the language but still use the tool. What situations are potential problems for me? This is really important because in terms of self-care, we as carers need to consider what the potential problems are. If we can't take time off from work, that's a potential problem in terms of perhaps getting our loved ones to their appointments. So what else do we need to have in place? And how can we put that in place? What are some things my friends or family may say to me if I am becoming unwell? This is for our loved ones to figure out, but it's also something for us to think about. Where do we need to go for support? Who do we network with? Who do we need to contact? How can I respond to what they say? And what strategies are most helpful and would you want to continue to practice? And it's not dissimilar to when we parent young children or we're training a puppy or a kitten, where we find that some strategies are very helpful and can sustain themselves over time, but other strategies are only helpful in the moment, and we need to gain information from that and apply it to future strategies, even if that one doesn't work. That gives us valuable information. The WRAP, as I mentioned, is the Wellness Recovery Action Plan, and it's a self-designed prevention and wellness process that anyone can use to get well, stay well, and make their life the way they want it to be. It was developed in 1997, now used extensively, considered evidence-based, and one of the nicest things about WRAP is that anybody can use this tool. Anybody, for any reason. You can use it for anxiety, you can use it for money management, it doesn't matter. It's a self-designed prevention and wellness program. Another very helpful tool for families is the health card system for bipolar disorder by Julie A. Fast. I always think of it as 129 pages of the best investment for a clear understanding of the management of bipolar disorder in particular, although I have also found it useful in schizoaffective disorder and other mood-based disorders. The health card system teaches partners and family members how to improve communication with their loved one and assist them in maintaining stability. And it works for anybody of any age, adults, teenagers, young children, although kids generally need parental assistance. One of the things about this particular tool is that it does require the participation of your loved ones. So this is a strategy that can be used over time. You can basically look at the symptom. What does it look like from the outside? What does it feel like from them? What are the things they find helpful? And what would they like you to know that would be helpful for you to do? And that's basically the gist of the health card system. Very, very good. Now, in the feedback loop, which is from the guide, Replanting Lives Uprooted by Mental Illness, a workbook for family members, use few words. Remember that the very part of our loved one's body that is compromised is their brain and their brain's ability to process information. So the fewer words you use, the more likely they are going to be able to engage. And again, when stable, review options together and scale the level of helpfulness. For example, on a scale of 0 to 10, how helpful was it that I left a note, call me when you're calm? On a scale of 0 to 10. It might be, well, in the beginning, it pissed me off, because this is what I've heard from people who have used this. But in the end, it was really helpful because it kind of got me to pay attention. I don't think I would have responded as well. I think I would have reacted while angry if you had said to me, talk to me when I'm calm. So I think writing it was really helpful. And it could have gone the other way. But that's how you use the scaling. On a scale of 0 to 10, how helpful was this? And if they can give you the information the way that I just described it, great. If not, and all they say is not helpful, still great, because it gives you information. When we ask them questions, use a close-ended format. For example, instead of saying, how are you feeling today? Because you'll typically get okay or not okay, which doesn't give you a whole heck of a lot of information. Ask instead, are you feeling crappy, okay, or good today? You're giving them a multiple choice question that they have to answer. That's not quite yes or no or fine. And when we think about asking our loved ones questions when they're not well, to make it in a simple, closed-ended format, a multiple choice question, very helpful. Ask permission before offering your opinion. This is good advice anyway, of anybody. Ask permission before would you like to hear what I have to say? If they say no, shut up. Zip it, keep it closed, do not share. If they say yes, and you think that this might hurt their feelings, then what you say is, okay, but I apologize in advance if this hurts your feelings. And that, by the way, is from that LEAP book. Create a routine in a neutral location around feedback. For example, plan a weekly meeting at a coffee place, Dunkin' Donuts or Starbucks, or we'll have lunch at Whole Foods. You want it to be in a public place, a neutral location where both of you feel safe about how to provide information to one another about how things are going. And once a week may be enough. It might need to be more than once a week. You'll be able to determine. In my experience, usually in the beginning, especially when a diagnosis is relatively new and a person is still kind of learning what their symptoms are and how to manage them, and so are you, more frequent feedback is helpful. In couples work, it's often called a 5 and 5, where once a day, couples will get together, usually before bed or after dinner when they're still kind of alert, and they say that they have 5 minutes each to talk about whatever it is that's on their mind that they want their loved one to know. And their loved one cannot give them feedback and cannot give them opinion or information. If they do want to do that, then they have to ask permission. So again, that idea of before you open your mouth and say whatever it is you want to say, in reaction, give a considered and respectful, would you like to hear what I think about that? And if they say no, stop. Reinsurance and encouragement notes and messages go a long way. I have found this to be especially true with any of my loved ones whenever they're feeling stressed out, to just send a card, even an e-card at these days, or a text message thinking of you, hope you're having a good day, take it minute by minute. You don't know what the next minute will bring. Send them funny pictures. Those help. And those are small, manageable bites that our loved ones can handle. Big gestures, not so much. Small gestures, yes. If they are overstimulated, reduce the stimulation by asking your loved one to close their eyes and just listen to the sound of your voice. This is especially helpful if you do go to a neutral place that's kind of busy, because they need to be able to tune out what's going on around them. And sometimes writing feedback is better. Some people respond to the written word much more than they respond to the verbal word, especially if they're overstimulated and they're highly symptomatic. They just can't filter what's going on around them to be able to focus on the content of what you're trying to convey. So these are important things to be thinking. Sometimes our loved ones get delusional, and again, from our wonderful resource, the workbook, we talk about interrupting delusions. And the way you have to understand this is that it is state dependent. In other words, you can't be drunk and sober at the same time. You can't be clear and delusional at the same time. You can't be rational and emotional at the same time. One of the things that we know from MRI studies is that different parts of our brains are lit up, are used when in different states. And delusional state is a different state than a rational or clear one. Separate from loved one. Ask for using management tools and reconnect when clear-headed. This is really important, is that you need to take a step back when they're delusional. You're never going to win an argument with somebody that's delusional because they cannot be clear enough in their thinking. It is not rational. Ask them to use their management tools. Is it true? Is it absolutely true? How does this make you feel when you think it? What would you do if you didn't have this thought? That is, in a nutshell, the 4 questions from Byron Katie's The Work. Extremely useful tools to have in having these conversations with anybody, of course, but especially with our loved ones, and especially when they're delusional. When they ask you questions, respond with one-word answers. For example, very often our loved ones, especially when they're delusional, will say things like they think you're Hitler, or they think they're Jesus, or whatever. And so they'll ask you, are you Hitler? Just say no. Do not have a conversation. Basic one-word responses. And preventatively, Boucher recommends reinforcing with your loved ones if they're having trouble with distinguishing what is going on inside or outside, to trust whoever, to have an identified person that they trust to always tell them the truth or give them a reality check. Sometimes this is very effective. Sometimes it depends on how far in the delusional process our loved ones are. In my experience, when one of my loved ones gets into a delusional state, when I catch it early enough, I can convince my loved one to get a tweak in her medication, which would help her get out of the delusional state. When it's much farther down the road, it's a little more difficult, but because of our trusting relationship, she will eventually listen to me and get there. And when you follow up, it does help to integrate humor. In fact, I usually know how unwell my loved one is when her sense of humor is gone, because she has a delightful sense of humor, even about her many illness and illness-related symptoms and behaviors. And when that's out the window, she's not in a safe place with herself, never mind anybody else. This is one of the worksheets that we recommend, and it's again from our resource. Does your loved one show any aggressive behaviors towards family when he or she is very ill? If so, describe them here. What do they look like? What do they feel like? And describe or list the responses you currently give to these situations. So, for example, sometimes when what will happen in our family with one of our loved ones is she starts lying. She starts hiding things. She becomes very isolated and reclusive. She doesn't reach out. She doesn't check in as much. She doesn't give you direct eye contact. She, her tendency is towards self-harm, but she gets very verbally aggressive. She gets very disrespectful and inconsiderate in her talking. So what I'll do now is I'll say to her, I don't let anybody talk to me that way. When your voice is as respectful as mine, I'll be happy to talk to you. I've also taken to saying, I love you too much to argue about this. I'll say to her, I see that you've been isolating. What's going on? I'll say things to her like, I'm not sure that I can believe what you're telling me right now, which of course gets her angry, but it still is a red flag and it gives her some information. Then what you do is you go back and you rate each of your individual responses according to how effective you find they are. They are, not at all, a little, or very much. And what I have found is that, again, depending on the time frame, if I catch this in the beginning, I generally get a better response. If I catch this as her behaviors are ramping up, I do not. But she does live in a supervised setting, and I do get in touch with the staff. If you viewed your loved one's behaviors as defensive rather than offensive, what would you try differently? And this is where I had a turnaround regarding my loved one when I realized that a lot of her behaviors towards me, where she was disrespectful and irritable and at times cruel, especially verbally, that maybe she was doing that to protect me from the brunt of her illness. When I started looking at it that way, my anger dissipated, my hurt dissipated, and what I had instead was sadness and compassion. And frankly, that's a way more effective place for me to come from than anywhere else. So this leads us to safety plans. And what we need to do for safety plans is look at what is the information that we need. And I've been using the community-based home support safety plan because it's a great model for developing one with your loved one or for your family. You can choose and there's a document, and you can find the document and the basics here. One of them is to write down or list in one place all of the names, roles, and numbers of individuals who you think will be most helpful to you or your family in a crisis. So you get all your contacts and resources in one place. And the questions to consider First of all, is there anyone you feel you must notify if there is a crisis situation? Anybody that has to know? Are there any people you think who can help calm the situation? Put them down. Any support persons or professionals you might want to contact. Anyone you might want to call who might be able to help with managing other priorities. For example, taking care of your pets or young children or closing up a house or providing transportation, whatever it is. You want to plug up all the holes so that when a crisis comes, you can handle it without breaking a sweat. If you could call or talk to someone to calm you or your loved one down, who would it be? And again, this was originally developed for community-based programs where the in-home therapist would be working with a family with a child under the age of 22, but it's fully adaptable to anybody of any age. It could be if you could call or talk to anyone to whom you or your partner can calm down, or your parent, whomever it is, that's what you do. The goal of the plan is that it isn't always possible to prevent a crisis. So sometimes the goal of a crisis plan is to manage the situation well or to keep people from getting hurt. The goal might be focused on the person in crisis, or it might be focused on how other members of the family respond. So the things to be considering for the goal of the plan is, what do you want the plan to accomplish for you or your family in this crisis situation? What would be a measure of success in managing a crisis or an episode? Let me tell you, in the very beginning or in the early stages of getting comfortable with an illness that has ebbs and flows, that has times when it is very active and times when it almost appears to be in remission, you may not be able to prevent a crisis. Sometimes your loved one gets triggered and you don't know why. Maybe you're away. Maybe it's just something quick and dirty. Maybe, who knows? To have this plan gives you the ability to respond without breaking a sweat. So maybe that's the measure of success, is that it did what it was intended to do. I usually find that for these kinds of situations to be the best goal and the best way to measure it. Did it do what it was supposed to do? Then yay. If you don't feel you can realistically prevent a crisis, what could you do? How could you take a step towards your long-term goal, which is to cut down on the crises or to diffuse them? And again, time is your friend here, because the more practice you get, the better you get at it. And I'm sorry to say that just like with any other illness, heart disease, diabetes, cancer, we do get opportunities to practice, because there are times when the illness is more active than not. And this is true with any chronic illness. This is true with arthritis. We know that there are certain times of the year when it's really cold, for example, that people with arthritic or autoimmune conditions tend to get worse. So we would have a plan to manage that. This is no different. Mental illness is a chronic illness. What would you like to accomplish as a parent or guardian or partner in managing a crisis? And what could be done to reduce the chance of harm or injury? This is what you look at when you are developing your goal. What kind of actions do you think are going to need to be taken? Only list actions that are going to happen. Don't set anybody up for failure, least of all yourself or your loved ones. So questions to consider: what things can you see yourself doing that will help you achieve your goal? What's worked in the past that you could try again? What actions do you need to take to achieve your goal? What actions could others take? What are the ways you think you could calm the situation down? If you think about trying actions, does it feel like they would work? And remember that your best friend when you're doing this is to remember the word experiment. You don't know at any given time what's going to work, what's not going to work. So experiment with it. It really is no different than training. For example, I have a dog who never needed to be trained not to jump on people. He's not a jumper. He doesn't do it. I had to take him back to training in order to jump up on a wheelchair arm, because that wasn't something he ever needed to learn, because he never needed to learn no jump. So I had to teach him to jump so that a client, he's a therapy dog, could pet him. So we know this with childproofing. We know that there are certain things in the home that you just always everybody plugs up, but then there are things that are specific to your environment that need to be plugged up based on what your child goes for. Adults with dementias often have these same issues that we know basics, but then there are specifics. So when you think about it, experiment, find out what's going to. Put together your contacts and resources. This is what the goal of the plan and the action. In Massachusetts, you can go to my website to get your emergency psychiatric services. We have an agency called Advocates. There are other parts of the state that would have a similar agency where a mental health counselor and a police officer will come to your home during a psychiatric emergency and do an assessment right there. And if you remember to ask them to do things like don't come to the house with sirens flashing, it is a mental health emergency, they will do the assessment. If they determine that your loved one needs to be hospitalized, they will also take care of it. This avoids an ER visit and the stress of that. And it also ensures that if your loved one does not need to be hospitalized, that the situation is diffused and you can be safe. It's wonderful. There is a new resource that Nancy Pizzo-Boucher has published, should be available any day now, and it's called the Mental Illness Triangle, How to Diffuse Mental Health Crises at Home. And then there's something called the Crisis Text Line, and it serves anyone in any type of crisis, and it provides access to free 24/7 support and information. And it's wonderful. So what's included in a crisis plan is members' information, name and age of member, mental health diagnosis, medical history, list of their strengths and interests. I like to include a picture of our loved one when she's well because it makes your loved ones people, not another statistic having a crisis. Make that personal, make it a whole person. Family information, list of family members who live in the home. Behaviors, the antecedents of previous crisis situation, what has occurred before, things that tend to escalate the situation and things that tend to de-escalate the situation. Make it bulleted list, simple language. Medications, name, type, dose, prescribing physician, pharmacy, phone number, any known drug allergies. Treatment choices, list of interventions or treatments that are currently being used, what has not worked, and what should be avoided. And what are the preferences? Especially if it's inpatient, what facilities are preferred? Professional involvement, the crisis team, family doctor, whoever is involved. Family supports, spiritual leaders, safety concerns. We always say in any family, we want to remove access to anything that's not safe. So put away knives, put away meds, put away guns, anything that could be immediately used as a weapon. Frankly, anything can be used as a weapon, but remove the most obvious ones. And if there is a psychiatric advance directive, meaning this is where I want to go, this is what I want to have happen to me, this is how I want to be treated, if there's a copy, provide it, and resources, which are advocacy groups. One of the advance directives that I really love is called the Five Wishes. And one of the reasons I love it is because it is both a power of attorney and a living will, and it's very specific to the needs of the individual. So there's no guesswork. And you can include a psychiatric advance directive as part of the Five Wishes. Now that we have a crisis plan, what's next? After a crisis plan is completed, share it. It's not secret. Share it with important people in the member's life. And the suggestion by NAMI is to share it with the local crisis team, the MH team or the police. I would do both. If I was going to be accessing advocates, for example, I would want them to have it on record. I would certainly bring a copy of it down to the local police station. That's why in the portfolio I include a picture of my loved one. Create a safe environment by removing any and all weapons and sharp objects, lock up the meds, create a plan that keeps other family members safe, and know that your mental health crisis. Again, in your kit, keep a binder with past history, snacks, things to soothe other siblings if there are siblings involved, change of clothes, basic hygiene supplies. This is very good to have like in a gym bag. Because very often, if they are taken right away to a hospital, you don't want to have to be running around assembling in a crisis. Already have it made up and ready to go, especially toothpaste and a toothbrush. Let responders know that this is a mental health crisis. Ask them to come without lights or sirens. Basic info, name of loved one, where they are in the house, best ways to approach. Really good to have some kind of a concrete interest to enable quick connections. If your loved one loves dogs and you can have a canine dog or a therapy dog available, you might want to talk about would you like me to get the therapy dog to come visit us, whatever it is. With Max, my therapy dog, we have offered that, and they haven't taken us up on it, but it is still out there as an opportunity and an offer. Have your safety plan available. Picture a loved one with likes and dislikes succinctly listed. Advanced directives, medication providers, family. This particular slide, really important. I would suggest you print it out and you let it kind of guide you. So in this webinar, we've talked about offensive and aggressive behavior. We've talked about reframing it so that we recognize it as defensive behavior. We've looked at some worksheets, including safety plans and some strategies. There are many, many resources that we've talked about, including I'm Not Sick, I Don't Need Help, and various publications that you can find on our website, on our page on defensive, not offensive, as well as on our page on safety plans and questions. You can get more information at growastrongfamily.org. Call us, and as always, take what you like and leave the rest. We thank you so much for giving us the time and the opportunity to guide your family to safety and better outcomes for you and your loved ones. Thank you so much.